Hello, everyone. Welcome to our storytelling event today with inspiring teachers. So happy to have you all here for a Fellows Friday. For those of you who don't know me already, I'm Lindsay. I'm the Chief Program Officer with Team4Tech. Joining me are colleagues Chris and Mehreen. And then an exciting new face for Team4Tech. We have a new regional hub in Brazil. And so this is Diego, and Diego is starting our regional networking and collaborations across Latin America and the Caribbean. So we've got new spaces, new things happening in the community of practice that you guys are all going to see. But really happy to have you here. For anybody who is new to Team4Tech, I do want to remind you about our online community. It is growing rapidly. We launched it to accelerate the scale of our capacity building with nonprofits around the world. And we're also taking learnings from our projects that we're doing with corporate volunteers and our nonprofits, and we're sharing them more broadly with the community, education tools, technology, resources, courses, and workshops, and more. Our community is well over 200 nonprofit organizations right now, over 1,000 members, and we're all coming together to share experiences, success stories, what's working, what are the challenges, how can we all help each other and foster connections. Within that community, we also have the private fellows and volunteers group for you to register for these monthly storytelling events. You can join other skill building events, which I'll preview later for you at the end of this presentation. And then you can also connect with other nonprofits who are seeking advice and support. So many of you fellows and volunteers are generous of time and spirit and heart, and you want to give more of your talents to the nonprofits, and we would love to make that happen. So always reach out if you're wanting to get more involved. Today's conversation is with inspiring teachers. And so we have Team4Tech's friend, Simon Graffi, who is the CEO and co-founder of Inspiring Teachers, joining us today. Hello, Simon.
Hi, Lindsay. Hi, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for being here. So Simon and I were actually able to connect in person a few weeks ago. Team4Tech hosted a dinner with like-minded education, nonprofit policymakers kind of across the spectrum in London. And Simon and his co-founder, Tom Lewis, were our featured presenters. And so we were able to have part of this conversation there in person. But it's lovely to see you again over Zoom. I hear it's very hot where you are. I'm glad it wasn't so hot when I was there.
Super hot. Yeah, boiling.
Well, why don't we, for people who may not be familiar with Inspiring Teachers, I would love to hear from you, a little bit of the history of Inspiring Teachers, why you do what you do. And then if it's helpful, I pulled this slide from your deck that just has a little bit of the introduction to your work. But please, in your own words, go ahead and share with everybody what you do.
Yeah, sure. So at Inspiring Teachers, we build tools to manage or to enable management of teacher professional development programs. And specifically, we've built a platform for managing teacher coaching through peer coaching, which we think is the most efficient and practical way to scale coaching in low resource settings like Uganda, Zambia, Ghana, and other places where we work. We've got a bit of a funny history, so I'm a former teacher, and along with other former teachers, we were all teachers at that time, back in about 2010, we set up this fellowship program that was a tiny cross-border teacher professional development, like collaboration, running in southwestern Uganda. And then over a decade, basically we grew that thing. So it went from being like me and my housemate and 3 or 4 others to like 550 people a year participating in these international fellowships, principals and school leaders, and instructional coaches from the US, UK. And anyway, we were doing that it got to the point we were running that program in 11 countries. So it was quite a big thing, but we just found we were just like on the hamster wheel, and you're just like running, delivering, optimizing. And then the pandemic hit and it completely knocked that hamster wheel over. But it gave us this initially painful, but ultimately productive opportunity to just reflect on the deep purpose of our work, which is all about helping teachers make a greater impact in the classroom. And we believe that teaching is noble work and that teachers deserve the support they need to get great results for their students. And so that's just the essence of what we're doing. And so although we'd got to the point where we were working with about 5,000 teachers a year before the pandemic, we've redesigned our program model. We've built some applications, we've built structured pedagogical program materials that are actually a lot more scalable. And so our strategy is now to work with ministries of education alongside local partners and prove concept for highly scalable teacher support models that can be replicated across systems and reach hundreds of thousands or perhaps one day millions of teachers. And yeah, so that's our work, and that's the silver lining from the pandemic for us. And we're now, a re-emerging, growing organization, and it was all worth it.
And it's been fun to be on that journey with you. I believe we're in year 3 of our partnership with Inspiring Teachers, and we've had some volunteers come through for projects. We matched you all with Deloitte a few years ago on a certain project. And then Mehreen, one of Team4Tech's program directors, she's been leading some volunteers from Salesforce through some work with Inspiring Teachers. I know that's been more through your co-founder on kind of product development and back-end organization, how to make the app functional. But maybe Simon, tell us a little bit about why Team4Tech, or maybe how our partnership has helped catalyze your work and where we're going together.
Yeah, so I think, another thing that the pandemic changed quickly is technology adoption, because suddenly everybody had to communicate remotely. And we've seen an uptick in the adoption of smartphones among teachers in their resource settings. And I think that's one of the changes that's absolutely here to stay. And there's just a tremendous opportunity to use mobile as a means to share effective teaching practices. And so one of the things we've been doing is producing high quality videos of teaching practices. And Lindsay, you know all about that, having been out and contributed to a project we were doing where we were actually doing that for the World Bank for some public goods. So we've built this application, Smart Coach. There's a version for teachers, a version for school leaders, and a version for academic support staff, so people who support teachers in schools. And those videos actually sit on that Android app. But the back end of that Android app syncs up with Salesforce. And we built it so it syncs with Salesforce because it gives us a really efficient way to manage users and turn data into insight using tools like Tableau that are now native to Salesforce. So over the last 3 years, each year, Team4Tech has accelerated what we've been able to do with developing this platform in 2 ways. The first thing is some catalytic additional funding, which has just helped us go further in terms of our team's capacity. And then the second thing has been technical support. And so the first project was Deloitte, and that was more a strategy project. The second one, I don't know if this one counts, but our collaboration around that World Bank work kind of ran in parallel with this project with Salesforce and teams from Tableau. And that was more about organizing backend and data and analytics. And yeah, we're excited to think about what the next one is.
Simon, I have a video linked in my slides, so maybe it'd be helpful just to show a little bit of a snippet of this. As he's alluding to, I was able to, about a year ago now, be on the ground in Uganda as part of an Inspiring Teachers World Bank project, where I was with their country director, Charlie, who you'll see on this video here in a moment, and filmmakers Harvey and Mike. And we were working with these really talented teachers in and school buildings like I'd never really seen before, in person, as far as very limited resources. Lucky if there was any sort of electricity, maybe the teacher had a smartphone. And so where Inspiring Teachers program is coming in is trying to get teaching strategies that it's not all reliant on technology, but how do we move past just kind of call and response? How do we get more active learning? What are some tangible things that teachers could use as examples, strategies to use with their students? And so what's awesome about the Inspiring Teachers program is that they have all of these videos. And so they're able to, in these low resource areas, really contextualize what the teacher should be doing. So let me share my screen and just show you a little bit of a snippet of one of the many videos that Inspiring Teachers has produced that are available on their platform. Oh, let me see.
Yeah, that was working, I think.
One problem we see in a lot of classrooms is lost time at the beginning of the lesson. It adds up. A smart way to make sure learning starts right at the beginning of the lesson is to give students a do now, a task that gets them focused and ready to learn from the moment they arrive until the lesson begins.
The pencils are there. Start writing. Are we together?
Your do now should be displayed clearly on the board. Take 2 to 4 minutes and review recent learning or preview today's learning.
Set and set, set and set.
It should be something they can do on their own and free you up to prepare the first part of your lesson. Good examples of a do now include questions on the board testing previous learning, reviewing an exit ticket from last lesson, or reviewing feedback on yesterday's work.
Hello, boys.
Hello, teacher.
Can you look at the chalkboard? Do you remember this? We said we looked at the vowels. Are we together?
Yes.
Then we looked at sound. Sound.
I'm going to stop it there for just a moment, Simon. Again, amazing, the joy I felt just being in these classrooms and being with these teachers who are doing so much without a lot of the resources that we're used to, like in the USA, for instance, in our classrooms. It was just really, really amazing and inspiring. And what you're trying to do, though, is that oftentimes, like, teacher professional development is sort of a here's the best practice, and then people just hope that the teachers remember to do that, right? And so where is your tool helping with the muscle memory on this and the repetition?
Yeah, no, I think muscle memory is a good analogy for it. It's like, I think teachers need to build the habits of mind that help them use the best practices consistently in the classroom. And some of that's about insight and having the right mental model for how learning happens. So part of what we do is about helping teachers reflect on how learning happens, how memory is built, how motivation is cultivated, and then think about the implications of that. So there's the kind of mental model piece, and then there's also just a bridge between knowing and doing. And we think the best way to help teachers cross that bridge is a combination of rehearsal, so actually preparing to do things in the classroom by rehearsing them ahead of time, and sometimes repeatedly, to the point of practicing to build that muscle memory, and then reinforcement, and that comes in the form of praise from a peer, and revisiting things. And we think that basically, if you can help a teacher get an insight, develop a technique, set a goal to use it, and then get the support to turn that into a routine. So it's kind of stacked, a bit like when we plan to brush our teeth after we shave or whatever. It's like, if you can stack teaching behaviors in that kind of habit stacking way, then you can increase the probability that effective things will happen consistently in classrooms. And basically, effective teaching is the sum of these micro actions. So that's worth designing for, and that's what we do.
And I'd love for you to just say a few more maybe about the importance of peer coaching. So I think that's one thing that really differentiates you all is the power of the peer coaching.
Yeah, so there's a lot of evidence both in the US, but also in low resource settings that teacher coaching is a very powerful way to help teachers go on that journey of getting an insight, developing a technique, setting a goal, getting the support to do it, and kind of structuring that process. Like, the problem is not whether or not teacher coaching works. It's like, who's the coach? Who has the time? And like the kind of US or UK paradigm is like, you have dedicated instructional coaches whose job it is to coach teachers in schools. Now, in places like rural Uganda, the ratio of those people in that role to schools is like 50-1. And sometimes in some places, 200 schools to 1. So it's just completely, like, the mechanisms make sense and the mechanisms still apply, but the model doesn't. And so peer coaching changes the equation, because it basically says coaching should not be the preserve of experts. Instead, it's like a set of practices that anyone with the right structure and support can do consistently, time efficiently. And it's about reimagining coaching as something that is just part of being a teacher. So every teacher a coach is kind of the mantra with that. And yeah, teachers also love it. It's really motivating to see yourself as an instructional leader. Yeah.
I love that. Talking specifically maybe about where you're at with your test bed. So I've got this slide up here if that helps show everybody a little bit. But we've been talking about going deep in Uganda, where you have all of your established relationships. And then a lot of what you were talking about in London are these other possibilities to go to other countries, and then the potential of getting the attention of ministries of education and really affecting affecting how teacher professional development works.
Yeah, so the way we think is that scaling is like a non-linear process. You need to get something really working at each kind of level of scale. So you've got to work in a classroom, has to work in a school, has to work in a cluster of schools that could be supported by a field officer or coach, then has to work in a district. And what we've this place in southwestern Uganda, we've been working for actually a decade. We've worked with like 70 schools in that area, but we've really focused in on running this testbed program with this peer coaching model in 15 schools. And the reason we're working with 15 of them is because it's just about manageable to do design at the same time as delivery when you're in an iterative learning way at that kind of scale. And it's also a kind of unit that is replicable within a system. And if you replicate enough 15s, you end up with a district. And if you replicate districts, you're really scaling to a country. So yeah, we've been running this program since last autumn, and each term we're basically we're iterating on it and we keep improving it. And yeah, we're learning as we're going. A lot of it is about simplifying resources and responding to what people want. So we've just developed the second version of Smart Coach app, and a lot of the changes we've made are about just adding features that teachers wanted. Like initially, we actually didn't build the peer coaching piece into the app, but we had like school leaders could coach their staff, or a field officer could coach, but like, yeah, by popular demand, we've now added that, and we're now testing that. And over time, we hope to just get to the point where we've got something that's really stable, really effective, really simple, and therefore replicable. So that's the journey we're on. We have to constantly persuade people that it's better to go slow if you want to go fast, and start small and get it stable rather than just kind of spray and pray. But it's worth it.
Several of us are educators on this call who, again, I'm very thankful at your approach because you're actually asking the users, you're wanting their feedback, you're incorporating their feedback. There's a lot of pushback with kind of ed tech in general that, people maybe in Silicon Valley are developing something without asking the users what they need and then just putting it out into the world. And so I appreciate that you all are going slow and that you're testing and you're using the trusted partners and the listening and iterating of like, that's what's going to build the tool that makes the difference and that is sustainable and scalable.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that, I think there are tons of amazing Silicon Valley ideas like Lean that apply to user experience design in these sorts of settings and like working with users and using user stories in product development. And we're trying to use lots of those best practices. But sometimes it's also just about making sure there's enough proximity. And so our local team's role is really to listen and test everything as we're going. And we think that kind of combination of like being in the room and taking the time and at the same time learning from the Ubers of this world is a good, a good sort of good way to get the best out of everything humanity knows about how to build great products, but for people in the places where they are.
Absolutely. That saying of nothing about us without us, of like you're going straight to the users. And again, I can't say enough of how important that is. I'd love right now to open it up to anybody else on this call with questions that you guys are wondering, things that you would like to ask Simon about inspiring teachers.
I'll start. I have a quick question. So Simon, just first a comment. When I first started teaching, I remember watching a video on warm-ups or do nows that was probably filmed in the 90s at a rich private school. And the context was just so far off from the urban public school that I was working in. And I learned the strategy and I used do nows at the start of my classes, but having a contextualized video, I think is so powerful. My question is, are these resources something that other community of practice members could access? And is there a way that they can see some of your other content?
Yeah, it'd be, yeah, so through the Smart Coach app, it sort of all becomes accessible in a way that works well in on a mobile in a low resource setting. We are hosting them on Vimeo at the moment, so we could share, we could definitely share those along. And we're also, really collaborative organization, and we'd love to hear from people who are interested in this work and want to go on a learning journey together. Yeah, I think that, seeing something done in a different context is, sometimes you just have that assumption like it won't work in my classroom, but seeing it done in your own classroom, I think one of the things teachers sometimes fall into the trap of saying is that wouldn't work with my kids, right? And so this is partly about solving for that, but it's also just about elevating great teaching in the places where it's happening. And actually there's loads of amazing teaching happening in the hardest places. And often that's like a response and result of the constraints. Yeah, it's like, necessity is the mother of invention, as they say. And like some of the ideas teachers come up with and ways to do things differently are really amazing and inspiring to see. Like I don't know if I'm, one of the things we are thinking about at the moment though, that I think is I think as a sector, we tend to focus on trying to change the person, but actually, in a lot of cases, teachers are in classrooms and they don't have the tools they need or like the scaffolding or support that they need. And, there are hundreds of thousands of teachers in settings where they're basically under-supported. So actually, organizationally, more and more of our work is about finding ways not to change the person or by helping them build more skills, but actually change the task, change the situation. I'm excited about instructional techniques, but I don't think it's enough to solve some of the big problems. And I think it's a piece of the puzzle, but instructional materials, teacher guides that make great teaching easier, I think are, really potent. And one of the things we're thinking about at the moment is how can we use the power of mobile to distribute things like structured lesson guides that ordinarily have only ever been printed and therefore don't reach teachers because of the cost of printing. Those are some of the things we're exploring and I think have tons of potential. Yeah.
I see Peter smiling. Peter has been a volunteer from Cadence Design Systems on several projects. Probably what he just said about trying to get printed materials digitized and out to the masses. I'm guessing some of your projects have involved that because so often we see that with Team4Tech. Did you want to unmute and share anything about your thoughts as Simon's explaining this context in Uganda?
For many people, reading is difficult and seeing a video of something in practice just makes it that much more sticky. I worked on a project in Seoul, Uganda, digitizing material and thinking of ways you can do it more low tech for areas and rural areas is really important. And sometimes videos take too much bandwidth, but if you can do it in images rather than words, those seem to be more sticky than a bunch of text.
Yeah, that's one of
you've been on. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say that was one of our takeaways through running these test beds has been it's always better to show than tell when it comes to this training material. So we have developed illustrations of different instructional practices that give you a just a little image that goes with the technique and kind of makes it go in easier. Just having that visual aid as well. I also think that one of the things that as a sector we haven't solved for is the fact that people are generally learning in a second language. And there's so much long-term opportunity, I think, to use AI to solve for that and use some of the tools like ChatGPT. There's not enough data in a lot of the languages, like where we work in southwestern Uganda, the language of instruction in early grades is Ruchiga. And there's not a large enough data set at the moment. Probably the largest data set for a tool like ChatGPT to digest would be the Bible right now, that's been written in Ruchiga. But I think over time, as people find new ways to make reading easier in local languages using AI, I think that's going to open up a lot. So I don't have the answers on that, but it's one of the hard problems that I think has become more solvable and will become more solvable. So food for thought.
I think you just gave everybody a preview of what we could be talking about next. That's a whole other conversation, right? Of how to start leveraging these new emerging, changing daily tools that can help us develop more materials, perhaps quicker, more efficiently. And when AI does start cracking the code on making them more culturally aware and translating the different languages, the possibilities are really going to be, I think, astounding. Because I think we're at kind of our minute mark where I'm hoping, Simon, again, I would love to have you back into our community anytime to continue to give us updates about how the test beds are going, about all the new developments with the Smart Coach tool. And then, of course, it looks like as you've got an eye to Zambia and Ghana, things in 2024, we're going to keep having you back to update us on all of that. Just really appreciate the work you're doing and the conversation.
Yeah, well, it's we're lucky to have your support, and it's been a lot of fun. So hopefully just keep building together.
Keep building together. I love that. Chris, let me ask you, as your community manager, what I've got on the screen. We have a lot of upcoming exciting events. What can we share with our fellows about how they can participate.
Yes, so many exciting things coming up. Next week, we have Lisa Solomon from the Stanford Design School, and she's running a session that I think fellows would love, our nonprofit partners would love, really open to everyone. I'm personally really excited about it, but she's talking about one of our leadership capabilities, navigating ambiguity. And I think that's going to be a really, really interesting conversation. So I would encourage you to join us for that. The week after that, for our nonprofit partners in Asia, we have a hub meetup. So if any nonprofit partners are listening in, be sure to join that. And then looking ahead to next month, we have 3 great events scheduled, and there might be one more coming soon. But the first is our very first community-wide networking event. And so this is open to everyone, to fellows, to nonprofits, to corporate partners, really anyone that wants to come in and meet the rest of the community. It's going to be quite open-ended, and it's really all about you, and everyone that joins will be able to share their ideas and their suggestions and make new connections. And then a little bit later in the month, we'll be doing a session where different partners will be talking about how they use technology in the classroom. And so it's going to be a pretty simple format where each organization will present 3 slides, one that introduces themselves quickly, one that talks about how they use technology in the classroom, and then one that discusses any successes and any challenges that they've had. But it will be a really fun way to hear from quite a few different organizations and get lots of different ideas about ways to integrate technology into the classroom. So lots of exciting things coming up that we would encourage you to sign up for and join us for.
Get into our community, come back daily. Things are always changing. Fridays, we send out a newsletter through the COP. Our colleague Jody, compiles kind of a lot of what's happened. So many different ways to engage. Again, really, really happy to have this conversation. This is my favorite part of my Friday is doing this. So Peter, thank you for being here today. Again, Simon, we'll see you all soon. But we'll go ahead and close out the Zoom session and see you online in the community of practice. Happy Friday, everybody.
Cheers. Bye everybody. Thanks, Lindsay.